everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of Mike's Nation. You can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter link is in the description. And today's episode, I want to talk about Bulls management. Also, please subscribe to my channel as well. Now, the Chicago Bulls are my favorite sports team. I follow the Bulls very closely. And in general, the NBA is my favorite sport or league to watch because I enjoy basketball. I enjoy just the team aspect of it, and I appreciate definitely all the strategy that goes into it, from matchups, from the kind of offense that a team will run, the different plays each team will run, how a particular team or coach or coaching staff will use the talent that's on the roster. So I definitely appreciate just the whole analytical aspects of the game. But as a Chicago Bulls fan, and I believe all Chicago Bulls fans should be pretty pissed off at the Bulls management at the moment. And I'll get into the reasons why and all that. So, let me get into basically the Bulls management in terms of John Paxson and Gar Forman before I get into the reasons why Bulls management needs to be held accountable and why they should lose their jobs. So, basically, John Paxson, who I believe, I forget his title, it's like vice president or president or something of basketball operations, I believe, but don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. So John Paxson, as some of you may know, was actually a former NBA player, and for at least part of his career, he played with the Chicago Bulls. And John Paxson, as a player, was actually an impactful player. You could say basically a role player, a key player. And John Paxson, during his playing days, was a high IQ player, and he was a good shooter. Even Michael Jordan, in his autobiography, praised John Paxson, basically saying, yeah, John Paxson wasn't a great athlete, but he had a very high basketball IQ. So basically, after John Paxson's playing days, he became a broadcaster, and I don't remember much of him as a broadcaster just because I was a lot younger then, and from what I gathered, though, he was, respected as a broadcaster, from my understanding. So after his time as a broadcaster working for the Bulls, he basically got promoted. And I want to say, basically, according to my notes, he started getting involved with their upper management in 2003. So John Paxson, basically in 2003, became GM, and basically early in his tenure, he fired, at that time, Bill Cartwright, who was the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. And the Chicago Bulls at that time were not a good team. And he replaced him with Scott Skiles. And Scott Skiles was kind of known as a hard-nosed defensive coach. And under the Bulls, Scott Skiles had a couple of competitive Bulls teams. Teams that were, not great, but teams that would play hard, make a playoff appearance here and there, and teams that, would actually play some defense too. So basically, Scott Skiles was dismissed by the Bulls organization, I believe on Christmas Eve, but I can't exactly recall the exact year it was, because I guess Scott Skiles was very hard-driven towards his players. His players didn't really like that, rumors were, he didn't get along with his players. So anyways, basically, Scott Skiles was replaced by Jim Boylan, who was an assistant coach, I believe, on Scott Skiles' staff. So Jim Boylan became the intern coach, and he was dismissed. So then John Paxson decides to hire. One of his mistakes he made was Vinny Del Negro. And Vinny Del Negro, ladies and gentlemen, did not have, in my view, a great deal of experience or was qualified to be a head coach in the NBA. Vinny Del Negro was a former NBA player, and I know for part of his career he played with the San Antonio Spurs. Not a great player, but certainly, not a awful player either. So he hired Vinny Del Negro, and basically during that time, during Vinny Del Negro's 2 seasons as a Bulls head coach, basically the Bulls were either at 500 or right around 500, and they made the playoffs both of Del Negro's 2 seasons there, and basically they finished the 8th seed in the East, so they're just mediocre at best, basically. So then, John Paxson and the Bulls organization, let me just say, because I know it wasn't just his input in this next hire they made the best coaching hire in the franchise since Phil Jackson, in my view, Tom Thibodeau. And one thing is, I'm a big Tom Thibodeau fan. I think he's an outstanding coach. And during that whole Bulls management versus Coach Tibbs, I was definitely pretty much on Coach Tibbs' side. So Tom Thibodeau, before he got hired with the Bulls, he was, I believe, assistant coach for over 20 years. And around the NBA, he was very well regarded by other people that were other coaches, people that were management with other organizations, and players around the league as well, because Tom Thibodeau was known for being a defensive taskmaster, and teams that he was in charge of running the defense for performed, better than average on the defensive aspect of the game. In 2008, when the Boston Celtics won their last NBA championship, Tom Thibodeau was on Doc Rivers' staff, and Coach Tibbs basically ran the team's defense. And during that season, the Celtics were one of the, if not the best NBA team defensively, one of the better defensive teams in the league. So coming into the job as the Bulls head coach, Tom Thibodeau was certainly well qualified and well regarded around the league. And Tom Thibodeau lives and breathes basketball 24/7, ladies and gentlemen. People don't know much about his personal life. He's kind of a private person, but he just loves the game of basketball. And also, too, he's a big admirer of Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. I believe Tom Thibodeau grew up in the New England area, so he's definitely a Patriots fan, and he just, admires the Patriots. So Tom Thibodeau was hired, basically, and his first year, 2010, the Bulls were definitely one of the best teams in the league. And throughout Tom Thibodeau's tenure, the Bulls had a team identity, and in my view, every good sports team, no matter what sport or league they're in, has one thing in common, and that is they have a team identity. You look at the Bulls throughout most of Coach Thibodeau's tenure, the Bulls were a tough-nosed defensive team. They played hard. They had a blue-collar mentality. Yeah, we might not be the most talented team in the league, but guess what? We're going to make you earn every single basket. We're going to make you work hard every single time on both ends of the court. And if you look at Tom Thibodeau, not only is he brilliant X's and O's wise, defensive coach, obviously, and but then one thing he didn't get enough credit for during his tenure with the Bulls, in my view, was how you look at the player development under him. You look at Derrick Rose, he became an MVP. You look at a guy like Joakim Noah, he improved. Will Deng improved. You look at a guy like Jimmy Butler, he became one of the better players in the league under Coach Thibodeau. You look at, all the backup point guards they had on the roster throughout Thibodeau's tenure with the Chicago Bulls. DJ Augustine, Nate Robinson, C.J. Watson, John Lucas III, and so forth. And the fact was, all those point guards, had impactful games, and basically in the offseason, the next teams that they all were playing for, they got more money as a result of the way they played under the Chicago Bulls, because Thibodeau elevated the play of those players. And Tom Thibodeau was kind of a no-nonsense guy, my way or the highway type of attitude, but the fact was, he got a lot of positive results. My only criticism of Coach Thibodeau was he was one of those coaches that he always had his foot on the gas pedal, meaning he basically drove his players too much, in my view. He played them too many minutes. I mean, we saw certain players like Luol Deng, for example, who played 38 minutes or more in a game, and basically Tom Thibodeau didn't know how to take his foot off the gas pedal. And basically that was my criticism of him as a coach. So basically, there's this tension building between Thibodeau and management because they said, oh, Tom Thibodeau's, not easy to work with, he's not a great communicator, he keeps to himself, blah, 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 all that BS. And, which I thought was unfair because, that's who the man is. That's his personality. Everyone's wired differently. I mean, it's like Tom Thibodeau was, doing anything illegal or, breaking law or hurting anybody. So who cares, that, he keeps to himself. He's a private person. Big deal, I, as a Bulls fan, I'm more concerned about, okay, what's he do to help the team to get better, X's and O's wise, player development, do the players play harder for him? Does he, have the respect of the players? Those are the things I care about as a fan from a coaching perspective, not, he kiss everybody's ass in the front office like Bulls management, wants all these coaches to do. So let me go back a bit because I did forget about say this about Vinny Del Negro. So there was a confrontation between Vinny Del Negro and John Paxson because I guess Joakim Noah was coming off an injury or he was still injured. And there's one game, I can't remember if it was preseason or regular season, that Joakim Noah exceeded the minutes that Bulls management wanted him to play. And as a result of that, John Paxson went to basically the Bulls dressing room and got up basically in Vinny Del Negro's face and pulled his tie because he was very, very pissed off about how Joakim Noah exceeded the minutes that he was supposed to play. He was on a minutes restriction at that time. So that just indicates, how John Paxson is a hothead. He can't handle, anyone that has a opposing view or does something he doesn't like. Instead of, talking to Vinny in a, respectful manner, he's got to act like, ooh, I'm all macho, I'm all tough, I'm going to pull your tie. So let me go back to Coach Tibbs. Basically, the tensions were mounting between Coach Tibbs and Bulls management. Rumors were circulating, and these rumors were going on for over a year if you were paying attention to the Bulls between Coach Tibbs and management. And so a couple incidents that took place was, now, some of you may remember Coach Tibbs had on his own staff an assistant coach by the name of Ron Adams. And Ron Adams was well regarded within the NBA circles as being one of the best assistant coaches in the league. And not only that, but he was well regarded by different players too, as just being a very smart X's and O's guy, a guy that's been in coaching for a lot of years. So Bulls management decides to fire one of basically Tom Thibodeau's assistant coaches, Ron Adams, because Ron Adams didn't exactly kiss her ass. And what I mean by that is Ron Adams, like Thibodeau, is his own man. He's got his own thoughts on players and things like anyone else. So I guess one point they disagreed on was Ron Adams and Bulls manager was signing, I believe, Kirk Hinrich at the time to a 2-year deal, and basically the second year was either team option, a player option, or mutual option, some type of option. I can't exactly recall what option it was. But Ron Adams thought, okay, that was too many years just because Kirk Hinrich had a history of a lot of injuries. So Ron Adams made a fair point and had a fair view on it, given the facts and given Kirk Hinrich's injury history. So they fired Ron Adams, and Coach Thibodeau was very, very pissed off, rightly so, because in my view, if you're a head coach, any sport, if you're a manager in baseball, you should be allowed to pick your coaching staff. Because if management picks the staff, then, how can you trust that staff member, or how can the players trust that staff member? Because, in my view, it would be basically the players would see it as, oh, this guy's a spy for management. We aren't going to trust him on anything. And the coach would probably feel the same. The head coach would probably feel the same way as well. So basically, another incident was basically, as reported by Joe Cowley from the Chicago Sun-Times. He's a fine reporter, and he's been covering the Bulls now for at least a couple years. So basically, Joe Cowley reported that management told Bulls players, I believe in his last year of Coach Thibodeau's coaching tenure with the Bulls, that, don't listen to Tibbs, don't listen to anything he says, you can sit out practice, if you want to. You don't have to work hard in practice. So basically, that really divided the team because, management saying one thing, the head coach is saying another thing. They aren't following the same footsteps or on the same page, basically, management and Coach Thibodeau. So they really undermined Coach Thibodeau and his, the coaches that he respected and handpicked. Management tried to undermine him and divide the team in that manner. So basically, the players were divided. Like, I get the impression that Jimmy Butler, Taj Gibson, a few others were big Tom Thibodeau fans because they saw, like, the development of their game under him. Yeah, he was hard-nosed, but he was honest. He wanted what was best for his players and the team. Tom Thibodeau was, fiery, passionate guy. You see him, always yelling at the officials. You can hear him lose his voice by the end of the first quarter. And this guy lives and breathes basketball. He's just, that's his life, 24/7. Basketball. He's fascinated with it. So basically, management divided Thibodeau and the players, as I said before, some of the players, and by telling the players, you don't have to practice today, or, you could sit out part of the practice, just ridiculous things like that. So, anyways, basically, Thibodeau's last season with the Bulls, not surprisingly, he was fired, the writing was on the wall, and, the Bulls management, made themselves to be asshats and a bunch of classless jackasses the way they fired Coach Thibodeau. They all attacked his character, saying, he's not open to ideas, he doesn't communicate. They all said that, even Jamie Reinsdorf, so Bulls management, they're just a bunch of hypocrites. It's, how many coaches do they get to fire and hire before they lose their jobs? They're on lifetime job scholarships. It's one thing if they're constantly winning championships and they still have their jobs, the status quo, like, a team like the New England Patriots, Belichick's been there for years. I got no problem with a coach that's won multiple championships or more, having a job for that long because, why fire him if, he's doing great and you're constantly in that championship window? That makes no sense to me. So, anyways, basically, Bulls management fires him in a classless manner. So, and not only they fire him, but, you look at the draft picks they drafted. The last few years, they've done a poor job in the draft. Let's face it. The fact was, let's take a look at a couple of the drafts. Now, to give credit, I'll say this. John Paxson, in his early tenure as GM, did hit on some picks. I'll give him credit for it. He drafted guys like Ben Gordon, guys like Luol Deng, even like a guy like Kurt Kime, guys that actually, were impactful players in a positive manner, helped them win games. But as Gar Forman, became GM, I believe he became GM in 2009 or 2010, one of those 2 years. And prior to that, Gar Forman was a scout for the Chicago Bulls. I believe, according to Wikipedia, on his Wikipedia page, it says he became the scout for them in 98 or 99. So ever since then, he's been with the Bulls organization. So basically, Gar Forman, in his brilliant wisdom, decides, let's draft a guy by the name of Marcus Teague. And folks, the only thing Marcus Teague was good at was, he was a good athlete. I'll give him that, fine. But athleticism alone isn't enough to be a, effective player in the NBA. You got to have, multiple things in terms of, helping your team win, but than just athleticism. And ladies and gentlemen, that was the same draft. The Bulls could have drafted Draymond Green. And not only Coach Thibodeau wanted Draymond Green, but so did his coaching staff. They're all like, we really like this Draymond Green out of Michigan State. this guy doesn't have a position, but, he plays with a chip on his shoulders. He's a versatile player, He's a guy that always plays hard. We think he can help us on the defensive end and the offensive end. He's kind of a Thibodeau player just because the way he would play, blue-collar guy, take no prisoners, a guy that, had something to prove just because he was drafted in the second round and, kind of, as I said before, played with a chip on his shoulders because in his mind he should have been a first-round pick, and rightly so. So, not only did Bulls management at that time, not listen to Coach Thibs and his coaching staff, but even Derrick Rose, who actually practiced against Marcus Teague, said this guy, he can't really play. So it wasn't just Coach Thibs, even Derrick Rose saw this guy, isn't going to really, do much to help. So fast forward to another draft, Gar Forman, I can't remember exact year, but it was the year they decided to draft Tony Snell. Tony Snell, yeah, good athlete, but like I said before about Marcus Teague, you gotta have more of the athleticism to be good in the NBA. You gotta at least be, pretty good in a couple aspects in order to, have a positive impact on the team that drafts you or the team that plays for you. So anyways, they drafted Tony Snell, and at the time, Coach Thibodeau and his coaching staff wanted Gorgui Dieng. And Gorgui Dieng is turned out to be a good rotation player. He's a guy that's got a nice mid-range game. He's a guy that does the little things, not real flashy, but set a good pick. He's in good position. He's an effective rebounder. He's just a guy that above average basketball IQ, a guy that under the radar that just helps you win games. Does the dirty work. Blue collar type of guy. So, Gar Forman, he's done absolutely terrible in the draft. And at least John Paxson had some hits. And also, let's not forget, too, John Paxson, I believe, I can't remember if it was him or Gar Forman, but another draft pick that has worked well was Taj Gibson. And Taj Gibson, he's a blue-collar guy, rebounder, good defender, decent athlete for a guy his size, team player, just a guy that plays hard, no nonsense, just a good locker room guy, effective player, fan favorite just because the way he carried himself, the way he played, he's giving 100% every time he was on the floor. So basically, Bulls management, the last few years, they've done awful in the draft, as I said before. So they throw Coach Thibodeau under the bus when they fired him. And, there's just rumors, since Gar Forman is buddies with Fred Hoiberg, that, Fred Hoiberg should be the next Bulls coach. And, ladies and gentlemen, Fred Hoiberg has no business of being an NBA head coach. Yeah, he was a, better than average college coach. He was an effective NBA player who could shoot. Yeah, he was, I believe he worked in the Minnesota Timberwolves front office, too, before he became the basketball coach at Iowa State. So anyways, Gar Forman hires Fred Hoiberg, who, like I said before, has no business of being a head coach in the NBA. And at the time, I don't think they interviewed anybody else. It's just, let's give him the job because he's my buddy, and he's basically not gonna be Tom Thibodeau. He's gonna be a pushover. That's, with due respect, that's who Fred Hoiberg is. He's like 180 of who Tom Thibodeau is completely. So basically, I was not happy with the firing of Tom Thibodeau. Like several Bulls fans, I was pretty pissed off, because its management should have been fired, not him. So, anyways, they brought Fred Hoiberg in. Like I said before, way over his head, doesn't deserve to be an NBA head coach. And, people were saying, maybe he could be the next Steve Kerr, which was a ridiculous comparison at the time because a few different reasons. Here's why. Like Fred Hoiberg, Steve Kerr was an NBA player. He was a good role player, good shooter too, and a good free throw shooter as well. So, and before even Steve Kerr was hired, he was actually in the NBA. He worked in the Suns front office. You might have been their GM at the time. I can't remember the exact position, but under his direction when he was with the Phoenix Suns had some good teams. They were pretty competitive. They had Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, and so forth. So they had some good players on the roster that were just competitively good year in and year out under his tenure. So then Steve Kerr became a broadcaster, and Steve Kerr was a guy that put a lot of time and effort into watching film, reading scouting reports, just doing his homework, which is what a broadcaster should do, just being prepared, in other words. And he was well regarded by, a lot of people. So Steve Kerr, despite, his lack of coaching experience, was, well qualified to be a head coach because of his prior success in, the NBA as a broadcaster or, working in the front office and for a team that under his tenure or direction, was pretty good. So, that was a ridiculous comparison to compare, maybe Fred could be the next Steve Kerr. And Steve Kerr may have a pleasant demeanor, like he was always a guy known for not only being very analytical as a broadcaster, but, a good sense of humor, down-to-earth type of guy. But, I remember Steve Kerr, his first year with the Golden State Warriors, I was watching a summer league game, and Steve Kerr just went off on the official. I mean, he just went off, he just blew up. I'm like, I like this guy. He's got some fire in him. Like, I like a coach that's got some fire in him that, not only will hold the players accountable, hold the officials accountable. Because as a player, I would love to play for a guy like that if I was athlete in any sport because, yeah, he's going to hold you accountable, but he holds everyone accountable. And if you do that, you're going to earn the respect of your players. And it's not, you're not giving anyone favorable treatment. Whether if you're the star on the team or if you're like the 13th guy on an NBA roster. Doesn't matter. If you hold everyone accountable, that's, everyone's going to respect you for that because, you're treating everyone the same. You're treating everyone equal. So, the Bulls management, like I said before, hires Fred Hoiberg, who I like to call him Pretty Boy because, like I said before, this guy, he's got the same look on his face. When an official doesn't make a call he doesn't like, he's like, it's ridiculous, He needs to grow up here and start holding people accountable. My God. Yell at the official on occasion if they make a poor call, but, hold your players accountable too. Treat them all the same. So, basically, not only they hired Pretty Boy, but they also hired his own. They didn't let him, to be fair to Fred Hoiberg, they didn't let him hire his whole coaching staff. I mean, they hired Randy Brown as assistant coach. They hired Jim Boylan as assistant coach. It's like he made these hires himself. And Randy Brown, prior to becoming assistant coach under Fred Hoiberg, was actually worked for Bulls management. So that kind of created a distrust between the players and the coaching staff because, particularly for Randy Brown, because the players are like, this guy's a spy for management. It's like Fred Hoiberg, hired Randy Brown, and Randy Brown at the time, was working for a different NBA organization, or, he was assistant coach with another team. That would have been one thing, but, he was an in-house hire, basically. So anyways, basically, management handpicks Fred's staff. For the most part, I believe Fred made like one hire that was with him at Iowa State, who was assistant coach with him. So basically, not only that, but as I touched upon earlier, they made this mistake in basically in Thibodeau's last several months of, telling the players, you don't have to listen to them, just listen to us. And as a result of that, the players under Fred Hoiberg, particularly his first year, didn't really, respect the head coach. They didn't listen to him. And then management wants to cry wolf when the players don't listen to him. Well, you're the same people that told the players that were under Coach Tibbs, now under Coach Hoiberg, not to listen to Coach, Thibodeau. So you can't have it both ways, management, Look at yourself in the mirror, you hypocrites. So anyways, players don't respect Hoiberg. Then there was an incident, Joakim Noah saying, Coach Hoiberg never told me, that I was coming off the bench. And yet Coach Hoiberg basically said, I told Joakim Noah, he wasn't going to start. I mean, come on. Seriously? You got to be on the same page. So anyways, besides not earning the players' respect, not you know, being a guy that holds people accountable, in my view, as a coach. Just ridiculous. And management undermining him, you know. I mean, it's just recipe for disaster. So, and then Garth Foreman, you know, the last offseason basically says, well, we need to get more athletic and more younger. Remember that statement, Bulls fans? He said, I believe, at a press conference. Well, how are you getting more athletic and more younger when you're saying a 34-year-old Dwayne Wade? No offense to Dwayne Wade, but come on. That's not getting more athletic and younger. And, you know, in defense of Fred, too, let me say this. When Fred was the head coach at Iowa State, he kind of ran a quick pace offense with ball movement, dribble, handoff, top of the key. And, you know, Dwayne Wade is an isolation player. So that doesn't exactly fit Fred Hoiberg's, you know, offensive system. You know, why not get players for your head coach that, you know, fits the type of offense you want? So it only makes sense if you want to maximize, you know, your coach to, you know, use his personnel and the type of offense he wants to run to the fullest results. I mean, it only makes sense, but that's Bulls management for you. You know, say one thing and do another thing, basically. So they just, you know, they just continue to have their jobs, like I said before. Lifetime scholarships for people who have done a, you know, god-awful job, which is ridiculous. Another thing, too, is Bulls management. It's like, regarding Jimmy Butler, it's, you know, they tell him what, you know, they tell him one week, oh, you know, you're the face of the franchise. You're going to be, you know, our cornerstone. Then the next week they say, oh, well, you know, you're a tradable asset. I mean, which one is it? I mean, this isn't the way you treat your best player. You know, you at least be consistent. You know, if you could say he's on the trading block, then stick with him. If you could say, you know, he's a cornerstone of a franchise, or he's a guy we're building around, then stick with it. You know, how can a player trust you if you're constantly, you know, flip-flopping, you know, your position on him, basically saying, oh, you know, he's tradable, you know, he's a star of the team, you know, he's a franchise of the team. I mean, come on, take a lane and stick with Bulls management. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's no wonder why, you know, speculation is that Jimmy Butler doesn't trust Garth Foreman. Well, can you blame Jimmy Butler? No, I cannot blame him for that. And, you know, it's just, these people think they're the smartest people in the room. You know, anyone that has a differing opinion than them, you know, they're personally attacked, they're dismissed, as I said before. You know, they don't know how to handle constructive criticism, you know. And, you know, worst thing is they're on lifetime scholarships. You know what? I won't be surprised next year if Fred Hoiberg, you know, gets fired, but yet they still get to keep their jobs. I mean, that's ridiculous. You know, as Bulls fans, we should not accept the status quo. I mean, the fact is, in the NBA, the worst position to be in is basketball. That's what this team is. You know, they aren't close to winning a championship, or they aren't, you know, rebuilding. And besides, even if they were rebuilding, do you trust, you know, this management to, you know, make the right acquisitions? I certainly don't. And why should you as a Bulls fan? You know, it just disgusts me. You know, I look at teams like the San Antonio Spurs, the Golden State Warriors, the Cleveland Cavs, the Washington Wizards, the Boston Celtics. You know, teams that are actually, overall, I'd say, are a lot closer to winning a championship than this Bulls team. You know, I mean, Boston and Washington have, you know, placed themselves just the next couple of years to being, you know, one of the better teams in the league. You know, teams that, you know, if LeBron James got hurt from Cleveland, teams that could, you know, possibly surpass the Cavs, you know, if they have a devastating injury. They're a lot closer to winning a championship than the Bulls are. I mean, like I said before, it's just tiring, you know, it's just fatigue, it's just frustration, I feel, with this organization, and I want to love this team. Like, you know, again, you know, I want this team to be what they were under Coach Thibodeau throughout most of the tenure. You know, it's blue collar, play hard, you know, us against the world mentality. You know, guys that actually take pride in how hard they play. I mean, this Bulls team, you know, they're so inconsistent. You know, last year, I mean, it's Bulls management. It's like they made, you know, a couple bonehead moves. I mean, trading Taj Gibson for basically nothing. You know, I mean, just, you know, a guy that, you know, like I said before, blue collar guy well regarded by his teammates and the fans. You know, effective player. And just, mind-boggling. And then, they say, oh, Cameron Payne, he's the future point guard of this team. And Cameron Payne wasn't even inactive for some of the games. And Cameron Payne, what I saw was just bad. I mean, he doesn't do anything well. It's like earlier last offseason, they trade Derrick Rose, fine. I got no problem with that. But then it's like Jeremy Grant, he's just terrible too. He's not a good athlete or can't shoot, And then they traded, Tony Snell with Mike Carter-Williams, who at the time I thought was a good trade, I admit, because Mike Carter-Williams was Rookie of the Year a couple years ago, and Tony Snell didn't do much with the Bulls. So basically they trade Tony Snell and Mike Carter-Williams with the Bucks, and Mike Carter-Williams can't shoot. He doesn't do anything, not a good athlete. Time they signed Rondo, I didn't like it just because I didn't like whose character in general. But Rajon Rondo turned out to be a good signing because he's kind of a mentor to those young guys. He's a good locker room guy, well respected by all the young players. He would take the time out just to teach the young guys, help them out. And he even worked with the guys in the D League. So I kind of, tells you that Rajon Rondo, kind of took a leadership role, tries to conduct himself within the locker room as someone with high integrity. And Rajon Rondo, especially too in the playoffs before he got hurt, played very well. He was a guy getting all other guys involved, active defensively, he's a good athlete. So they have to bring him back because after him on the roster, the point guard position, they don't have anybody. I mean, all the guys they have are just bombs after him at the point guard position. So they have, like I said before, they must bring him back. But it's just so irritating, those managers say, oh, this guy's going to be a future, point guard of our team, but yet, he's just bad, all the accusations they made at the position outside of Rondo, it's just very disappointing and frustrating. So like I said before, they continue to make false moves, but, who holds them accountable, Why do you guys get to be on lifetime scholarship when you haven't won one single championship? Why do you get to dismiss people who you disagree with just because they don't want to kiss your ass? I mean, this is just ridiculous. And by having this, by throwing people under the bus like they did with Coach Thibodeau, it's going to be harder to attract talent because, what players go on to sign with you, or what players go on to re-sign with you, what head coach, is going to want to basically work for you, what assistant coaches would want, to work for the organization if, hired by a head coach. It's just absolute hot garbage. All right, that concludes my episode for this week. Thank you for everybody, and I apologize for the length, but I just want to get that off